So my name is Adam Lippin, and I'm the founder and CEO of HearMe.app, which you can see in my t-shirt, which is essentially an app that is designed to bring people together, uh, helping to address the issues of loneliness and a sense of disconnection, and the notion that sometimes we just need someone to talk to, and a problem shared is a problem halved. And so I joined Hear Me. We joined this Listen First Coalition, became partners in this National Week of Conversations because it's all about bridging divides. And so this week, I think it's a very, very important week. America Talks, there's a National Week of Conversations going on. And so this particular conversation is based on empathetic listening across racial divides. Very powerful, very big subject. And I want to interject myself almost as little as possible in this. So before I introduce the panelists, I wanted to show one of the members of Listen First Coalition is it's called the Dialogue Project, and they studied issues of difficult, like what do people have a hard time talking about in the world. So I'm just going to share my screen for 1 second and cue this up. And so 45% of people said they have an inability to have respectful conversations on major problems. The three top conversations that people found most problematic: politics, which we know about from, we know, right? Huge, huge divide. Race and sexual orientation, right? And that 82% of people think they should be more respectful, but only 50% want to spend the time to do it, right? So this is, for me, is a fairly stark, very research-based, diagram of the problem. So to talk about this in their own shared lived experience, I'm going to introduce our panelists now. So first we have Peg Fong, who is a correspondent at The Economist magazine. Peg is a journalist and a former newspaper reporter at the New York Vancouver Sun, the Globe and Mail, and the Toronto Star. She was a reporter and a producer for CWBC in Vancouver and is currently the Vancouver correspondent for The Economist magazine. She teaches journalism and business at Langara College, and excuse my pronounce, Quan Len, you can tell us later, Polytech University, and hosts this amazing podcast called Alone Together. Write it down, Alone Together. It's a wonderful meditation on loneliness, and I was privileged enough to be on that podcast, and it's just magic. Kat McIntosh is the manager of global peer support for Mental Health America. If you're not familiar, Mental Health America is one of the preeminent US-based organizations, and I believe they work globally. I know they work globally, dealing with mental health issues. Kat's lived experience of bipolar disorder and early trauma has shaped her approach in advocating for inclusive, intersectional, and multidisciplinary approaches when developing policies and systems within service-centered institutions. As the manager of peer advocacy and support services at Mental Health America, she helps in updating the Center for Peer Support site, resources and content, as well as assists in creating and launching the online platform for peer partners. She's passionate about encouraging society to see individuals through a trauma lens, particularly as it pertains to LGBTQIA+ community and people of African descent. So there's a lot there. So so I'm going to just jump into it, and I'm going to just start with the question. And for me, that question is, this is so big, right? It's a big topic. So just how do we begin the process of listening across racial divides when we have a hard enough time listening to each other without divides, right? So how do we begin this process? And I guess we can start with Kat.
Yeah. So I think the main thing that we need to think about when we begin this process is recognizing that for so many years, right, a lot of persons have not been able to even express their viewpoints and express their viewpoints point in a way that is accepted, that is understood. And I think that is really important for us to understand that experience, understand the trauma that comes with that experience, understand how that has affected persons. I had one an amazing and unfortunate experience where I did an emotional CPR training, right? And emotional CPR is wonderful. It talks about how do you speak from your heart space and communicate with another person from the heart space. Wonderful training. But by the second day of my training, I cried. I took off my video and I just sobbed because I had this very vivid realization that we have been talking about speaking from a heart space, the need to speak from a heart space, why we should, but we never actually gave space to the black persons, the Asian persons, or any other multicultural person in the room that hadn't been doing that. And I felt, and this was my personal feelings that caused me to weep, um, that sometimes we say, you know, listen with empathy is important too, and it feels sometimes as a reproach, as a discipline reproach to persons like me who haven't been able to do that. And there needs to be that acknowledgement before we begin any conversation to say, you know, we recognize that people have not been able to do that. We recognize that spaces haven't um allowed for that conversation, and let's start from there. Let's bring that recognition and that elephant in the room. Let's acknowledge that elephant first before we begin to have any conversation. And I found when I brought that forward to my group, we ended up having over half an hour discussion about just that. And there were a lot of person that was experiencing those similar feelings of, yeah, we haven't been able to say those things, and this is a reason why it's difficult, especially for multicultural folks, to express and listen with empathy because we weren't afforded that for so long.
I'll jump in as well, and I know Kat and I and Adam have talked about this. First of all, it's really good to see so many people here, because for a topic about how to listen, we know how important it is, and then I'm sure all of us, because we're here, we're always going out there and telling other people about how important it is that we have this idea, this collectiveness that, hey, we need to listen to each other, we need to understand what some of the trauma that has. And I know Kat has talked about the trauma, and we've talked about how violence often leads to silence, right? And for me, there's a real key point for after the shooting in Atlanta, after the George Floyd killing, all of this stuff automatically for many people leads them to internalize that, and then they don't talk about it. And we really do have to be able to, before we can talk about it, think about it and listen to what other people are saying. And we have to encourage, when that violence leads so many people to kind of to clam up, to not want to talk about it. That is particularly important for us here, and I think we're all here because we want to be able to listen with more empathy everywhere. And the fact that we're here, we're probably ahead of some people already, and we've just really got to go out there and push this message that listening with empathy is so important, and that for all of us here, we've got to do it to 3 people, 4 people, 5 people. Exactly. I think there is this pandemic of silence, of this loneliness, where people just feel that they've been isolated and that no one understands what they are going through. And so it's really hard for people to voice that. And as we come out of all of this that's happened, this violence and this pandemic, we really got to think about how it is that we can reach out to the people who have been silenced.
You know, what I just heard is really very powerful, because what I believe I heard, is that when you're marginalized, when you're not given a voice, it not only you are not able to participate, but it's scary to participate because you don't have that starting point. And it even makes that it just makes it so much more difficult. There's so much there to unpack. and people who are historically not marginalized like don't get it, right? Like, and really understanding what Kat was saying, that like that the generations, the years of sort of like not having a voice, and then all of a sudden you have a voice, and it's like you're pissed, you know. So, and you know, you want to get it out, and then other people, why are they so angry, you know? So it's really, it's amazing. So I just, I guess, you know, to frame up the next sort of topic, it's sort of like, so, you know, post George Floyd, post Atlanta, what was different before and after, and what hope do you see now, or what work do you have to see now, and how do you deal with that when you're getting pushback from sort of a cancel, you know, the cancel culture and, you know, all that stuff. So it's like there's this political component along with the, it's gotten all very complicated. And so just if you want to talk a bit about sort of how to navigate this world and what thoughts you might have for other people that want to navigate this world.
I'll jump in on that one. And you know, after Atlanta, and after a number of incidents, I had people reach out to me and say, "How are you doing?" And at first, I was a little bit kind of offended and going, "I haven't heard from you in a couple of years, and you're reaching out and saying, 'How are you doing?' I heard about the shooting." But here in Canada, where I'm based in Vancouver, there was a recent very traumatic situation where the bodies of 215 babies were found at a residential school. And what happened in that case was that there was a tremendous uptake in trauma kind of coming up to the surface, generational trauma, where people were saying, "I heard about this from my grandmother." And then in this case, there were a lot of trauma lines, a lot of calls where people could make calls to talk about this. And then there was, in some ways, a collective kind of understanding, and people were doing things to turn on their porch light, right? To leave children's toys and shoes up in a place where people could see it. And I think that is really quite healthy for us as a society when we start to reach out collectively and say, "We hear you." Right? We hear you, even if it is a generational trauma, even if it's something that happened 60 years ago. We need to, as a society, start to gather together and say, as a society, we hear you, and not just individually reaching out. And to me, I think that was a really good step, because maybe 10 years ago, when that story would have emerged, there would have been a lot more. We don't need to apologize for what happened in the past.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. You know, I think it's a really important point of how do we do this in the age of cancel culture and all of these things. um but you know, my question is often, we've been talking about empathy for a long time, right? But I am questioning whether we have really tried to gain an understanding and practice of what empathy is, right? Because empathy says that we're going to understand and we're going to share the feelings of another person. And with empathy, one of the things that I did for my undergraduate thesis, I spoke about empathy. And it brought me upon this theme of cognitive dissonance, where it's impossible for someone to hold two conflicting views. So I can't be empathetic about another person's experience and share their experience and share their feelings, and also hold stereotypical views about their experience. That it itself will create a discomfort within me. And this is why I wonder whether we've been practicing empathy, because you know, we speak about violence, but I feel like it shouldn't have had to reach to violence for us to recognize, oh, we have a problem, right? For me, it's that we should have been seeing that all along had we really been practicing that concept of empathy. And in addition, in terms of like cancel culture, I think that in practicing empathy, w- we begin to understand, one, why people are so angry about their experience. So ag- um angry angry statement or angry disposition doesn't mean hate for the person. It means hate for the system. It means hate for the things. And I think that if we start to understand or start to listen with empathy a bit more, we will get where that anger comes from, because we ourselves will be prompted to anger. I again, I talk about it from my experience that I am not a trans person. I don't share a trans identity. But when I listen with empathy about trans situations, I get mad. I get angry too for that community and the things that they're experiencing. And I think for me, um, if you're listening with empathy and you're hearing about the injustices that people are facing, and you're hearing about um, babies having been killed and children having been killed and no one knowing about it in Canada, or the things that the black diaspora is experiencing in the US, and you're not getting angry about it, and you're not feeling that what the heck is going on here, I implore that you think back to that definition of empathy, and figure out, um are you really listening, understanding, and sharing in those feelings, because those feelings are right to be angry.
And I think, Kat, you're right in that empathy should lead to anger sometimes about what has happened, right? So a lot of times we talk about, is it enough for us to nod and listen passively when people talk about the anger of some of the things that have happened last week or a generation ago? It should drive us to anger. And I think maybe one of the key things for us to think about listening with empathy is how listening with empathy should lead us to anger, and to make some resolve personally, to make some change, right? To not just say, oh, I hear you, but also what you're saying is has driven you, and now it should drive me, and my job is now to drive other people to hear, who may not be ready at that stage to listen, not just listen with empathy, and listening with empathy to the point where they get where the point where they can make action, right? Do something, make some change.
Uh,
So
yeah. And Adam, if I can just say what Peg said is so right in terms of the collectiveness, because I think when you listen with empathy, that collective experience becomes even more. And we saw that. We see that in every civil rights movement. We see that in Black Lives Matter movement. We see that in all those experiences. We see that in Me Too movement. That when people started sharing, it wasn't just the people who were experiencing this that came out to protest and talk about it, but it was all these other folks that said, wow, I'm hearing you, I'm feeling you, and yeah, let's do something about this.
yeah, um, so I'm going to just bring up so his so emotional labor, and the amount of work it takes people who are historically more marginalized to, it's a lot of work, right, to carry it. So I happen to be gay, and I don't have, and that brings for me stuff, and I'm able to sort of like hide it, right? Or it's like it, but it's a lot of, so for someone who's really marginalized, that feels like they always have to do a lot of work just to get someone to a baseline of human decency or understanding, so they're not saying like, yeah, don't be so, all right, I hear you, why, why are you so angry, that's what it has to, from just looking out, it has to be so infuriating. um and so I think, to your point, it's like to start from this space where like we realize we all don't have that same starting point, right? And a lot of us, to get to that place, and need some love and support around it, because we've been so bashed. And for, how do you have people that haven't had that experience to sort of recognize that and meet us where we are? So I don't know what the question, but something, if you can speak about sort of like the emotional labor required, and how do you get people to understand that, and then get to that space where they can have some empathy because they get a sense of, even that might not have been their experience, it's a real experience for many, many, many people.
Go, Kat.
Yeah, I'll take this one. It is emotional labor. It is hard. The way that I have the conversation with folks is, we say that, it takes one person, right? It takes one person to make a change. But did we ever stop to think about how hard that journey was for that one person to make that change? Did we ever stop to think about the stress and the depression, the mental health concerns that person would have experienced to make that change? And for me, it shouldn't be about one person, right? Because the systems that we have right now weren't built by one person. They were built by a lived experience. They were built by lived experience that were white, were heteronormative. It had very specific lived experience. And therefore, if you're talking about how can the collective make change, there are persons in the collective who have the power to change the systems, to hire persons within executives who have those different lived experience behind them, who can change policies in that meaningful way. So it's not just, and I really dislike, I have a pet peeve about, I'm a pansexual woman, and a lot of times I'm pansexual and I'm Black Caribbean. And a lot of times, if I'm put on, like, let's say a board or, some sort of advisory council, I become the multicultural LGBT, like I become that check mark for all of those things. And it shouldn't just be me. That's a lot of labor to put on me as one person. There should be so many more people that look like Peg, that look like me, that look like, all the I think about it even in terms of like the LGBTQIA and all the acronyms, right? Do we have the LGBTQ? Like, do we have all that representation? When we think of the Black diaspora is so varied, right? There's Black Caribbean, they're African Americans, they're so varied. Do we have all those collective voices adding to what we're doing? And if we don't, then for me, it means that we are relying on one person, and it's unfair.
Mhm.
So I can't say this in so many ways, but it's really unfair to just have that one person carry the lived experience for it all, because they can't. I can never speak to the trans identity. So I want persons who are trans there speaking about their lived experience.
I think what Kat is saying is that maybe this is something that a lot of us who are here, I mean, if you're here, you care about this, right? And so I think for many of us who are at this panel, one of the things that I know that for me, what I've been trying to do and what other people have been trying to do, and I know what Kat has been trying to do and Adam have been trying to do, is asking people, how is it that I can help you reach the people who neither of us have reached yet? Right. So the fact that I'm having a conversation with someone who has had a lived experience, now is the time for them to kind of think about how is it that they can also reach out to someone who hasn't even had that conversation yet. And I'm sure for many of us who are on this panel, it's exhausting. It's exhausting because so many of us are the one, right? We're the one in that organization. We're the ones telling, our office managers, we're the ones telling the bureaucracy, we need to bring in more. And for everyone that I bring in or someone brings in, we need to bring in two more. We need to bring in three more. I mean, to me, this is a pretty good pyramid scheme to be involved in. If I can do this kind of, if I can do this kind of Ponzi scheme, I would be really happy in a way, because the person that I'm talking to, that I'm listening to, I know that there are 10 more that isn't being heard. Right. And so it really is a matter of kind of getting to that point where we have to kind of start building each other up, and the people that are being built up, they need to, not they need to, but helping them reach out and build in even more people out there, because the only way that we can really create meaningful change is to not have just one. right? Not just have one or maybe two, and we hit the LG. Where's the rest, right? We need to kind of reach as many people as we can, and I know that one of the things that we've talked about is also neurodiversity, right? Not just listening with on the racial side, on the gender side, but also people who just have been silenced for so long. So there's it's tiring. I don't know about you. It's
Yeah,
been a long pandemic. It's been a long road,
yeah.
right? And it's tiring, and I say don't be tired yet, right? Because there's so much more to do.
So there's so much here. I wish we had hours. I want to pull it back a little bit um, in terms of this National Week of Conversations in America Talks, right? Which is primarily the events that I've been to and members of the organization are, it's, like the political divide. And then, um, so I'm trying to, so let me just ask a question, right? So, Tom Hanks recently, I guess he wrote an op-ed page and that basically was saying, apologize, saying we didn't know enough about Tulsa, right, Oklahoma, and this Juneteenth, and where it's like, and so like the NPR said, I'm glad that you're not racist. That's wonderful. What about being anti-racist? And where is your understanding of, hey, as a white male with incredible power making movies that you financed and were a part of that were historically, from the white perspective and sort of the white heroism kind of a thing. And it's like, you know, so you took it somewhere. You acknowledged there's been this historical sort of discrimination, this awful event that happened, but you acknowledged it, which is wonderful. But what are you doing to make a difference there? And then you have another side. You go to Fox News or the New York Post, and like now Tom Hanks is getting bashed for saying something good. So I know there's a lot there, and I know it's exhausting. I just wanted to throw that out there because it's so complex. And so any thoughts you all have on that? And also, if anyone we're about 25 people here. So if anybody wants, after Kat and Peg can address this, if you want to add to this conversation, I think that would be wonderful. But I wanted to throw that out there because it's so hard. It's all so hard. And so I guess that's a question.
I'll start if that's okay, Kat. For me, I think as a journalist, I've been a journalist my whole career. And one of the things that I've recently kind of started to understand is that this echo chamber of who I listen to, who I talk to, interview, who I reach out to in order to find out information, my world is very small. My world is very narrow. And AI is not helping, right? Like the algorithms telling me this is who you should be your friends with, this is who you should connect with on LinkedIn. Like all of you, you know, this is a great group, but there's like of the people here, there's a lot of people out there who I should try to be understanding a lot more. And we were just talking about that the more that we stick within what we're comfortable with in this area, the harder it is, because who could find fault with Tom Hanks saying, hey, I was wrong, I love history and I didn't know this, and we should all know more, right? And exactly, Adam, he's getting piled on for this, right? And he reached outside and said, I didn't know this. And so many of us, for me at least, I know for sure, I read the same people over and over again on Twitter. I follow the same people, in all of my feeds and my social media feeds and everything like that. I need to be more expansive so that I can really hear what is being said out there. And again, this comes back to that first question. The silence is like, how do you reach the people who aren't saying anything at all? And how do you listen to them? Right? I mean, that to me is like, even if I make that a resolve every day, I'm going to go listen to someone who hasn't had a voice. It's still hard. Like you will never be able to listen to everyone.
Yeah, so I'll definitely chime in here. So it is definitely unfortunate, um, for what is happening to Tom Hanks. And I have a personal view, but I don't accept cancel culture because I don't think a lot of the times cancel culture is productive, in terms of really creating meaningful change. But I say that, and I also hold the experience of the anger, that we spoke about earlier, of how did you not know? Like, how did you not know that people were going through it? And I think that's where the anger from cancel culture comes from, in terms of, I think there's a need for folks to recognize their inherited racism in the same way that BIPOC folks have recognized their inherited trauma. And I think it takes both sides to really make this work, right? So for so many years, BIPOC folks were living with that trauma. We were living with those experiences. We were hearing it from our grandmothers and great grandmothers and all these things. And we were taking in all those things so that, you know, I have never personally experienced racism like my past ancestors would have, because I have the privilege of being Black Caribbean. But I sat in a mental hip hop discussion, and persons came on to talk about hip hop is of the devil, and hip hop is ruining the youths. And I cried. I absolutely cried, and I realized that it was because of my inherited trauma from all the things that persons had gone through before me that I didn't really personally experience. And it was one of the first times I had been confronted with it. And it was so impactful, right? It was like, you know, I was carrying all that load from generations gone past. And I say all that to say that, like, in the same lens, I pose a question to a lot of folks that, are you recognizing your inherited racism? Are you recognizing the ways in which your ancestors, your generations would have caused trauma? And therefore, you won't come on to say a statement as, we didn't know that Tulsa was that. Come on. Like, even in terms of like an empathetic lens of even saying that, that is not empathetic to the people who have been carrying that hurt and are still carrying that hurt and are still waiting for some sort of reconciliation, whatever that looks like in that process. um and I want to say as well that I recognize that it's difficult for a lot of folks to see their inherited racism, because there's been this view that saying that my family, or I have inherited racism, that makes me a bad person, and it doesn't, right? And I feel like sometimes persons have put their words with being a good person to, oh no, there's no racism behind me, or there's no racism behind my generations. But you can hold those two experiences. You can hold the experiences of, there have been a lot of racist things that have happened in my generations, in organizations that I've worked with, etc. And I am a good person wanting to change that. And how do I really begin changing that? And I agree with Peck in terms of stepping out of ourselves. Susan, you posted about responsibility. And I think that's where it starts, that if we take responsibility that we have inherited racism, and we have inherited policies, and we have benefited from racist policies and that privilege that comes with that, then we can also start taking responsibility for, how do I even begin to change this? But it starts there. And I don't think that a lot of people have started that first piece. And that's the reason I think we're struggling with the second part of the action.
Powerful, and thank you. I want to share something that I did, which was helpful for me, in terms of understanding my privilege in a way that for me didn't confront me being racist. And just quickly. So I went through. I'm a member of this organization called Narrative 4. It's amazing. It's a storytelling organization that brings all different types of people together. Narrative with the number 4. Anyway, I rewrote my story based on historical accuracy. So I grew up in my first house was in Austin, New York, in Westchester County, and so I did some research on redlining and historical discrimination. So anything about Westchester County, it's been sued for decades because of redlining and mortgage discrimination, et cetera, et cetera. So I grew up in this working class family, and yet we were able to live there, and other people, Black and brown people, were not able to live there. And I sort of went through my career. My first job in commercial real estate was it was it was all based on privilege that I had. And sort of for me, going through that without a critic, without wanting to criticize myself, but really understanding it, like looking at all the steps that happened in my life and the privilege that I had, or where I am, partly, and a lot of parts stem from the fact that I just happen to be white, right? And that's just me, but then going back generations. So I don't know if that works for anyone. I think it might be an easy way for some people to unpack it, where they're not looking at it, it's not as scary perhaps. It just so yeah, so that's that. And I personally, I think Tom Hanks should get, not cancel culture, but like, dude, yeah, use your power now. You've recognized this as a problem. You have power. What are you going to do about it, right? So I think at this point, if anybody else would like to share anything, comment on this conversation, it might be nice to bring in other voices. So feel free to unmute yourself continue in the chat box, and then we can continue with other questions. But if anyone's interested in dialoguing around this, I know.
Adam, I'm seeing Jim has his hand. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to apologize. I didn't get into this until about 1:25. I tried to book two things back to back. I knew it might be a problem, but I still wanted to get here, and I'm glad I did. What I struggle with right now is what does it mean to be anti-racist? In fact, I'm going to go to another event later on this afternoon, pull up a chair at the anti-racist table so I can learn more about it. Try to do this as succinctly as I can. I grew up in Muskogee, Oklahoma, 60 miles from Tulsa. I grew up, I was going to, in the 7th grade, it was in the late 50s, I'm 74. In my Oklahoma history class, that was never taught. And the community was completely segregated. I didn't know any Black kids my own age. They didn't know me. We were kept apart. I think I first heard about the Tulsa thing. It's probably been 3 decades ago, but or around about that time. So on one thing, I have to try to forgive myself, because as a kid, I didn't have a lot of power about what was being said. I mean, the Black kids in the community and I grow up in essence with much the same story, but the opposite sides of it. We played different parts. My soul happened to come up in a white male body. I don't know what people's spiritual belief is, but I don't know that I had any choice about how I showed up. My parents, however, although the culture around me taught me a lot about negative things about Blacks, I didn't hear it at home. And so, but I also didn't hear that it was wrong, but I just never heard my parents say anything bad about anybody that I can honestly recall. So as I got into school and around other people, I began to hear it, and I began to notice it when we'd walk downtown that Black and white people wouldn't even look at each other. Or if my mom and I went into a store and a Black lady or Black man was getting ready to go in, they always deferred. And, we had white only drinking fountains and colored only drinking fountains and all of that. But because my parents had this view of treating everybody okay, I mean, I just knew that was what we needed to do. the racism I was taught didn't, it felt guilty at times, and yet it took. I was young and impressionable. But when I got out of school, I moved to Colorado, my early 20s, and started teaching in a college. And in Colorado, the largest minority group was Mexican Americans, but there was a Black community. But in my classes, I had all three. And intellectually, it became very clear to me that the stereotypes were a bunch of hooey. Because my recollection was the bell curve kind of applied. I had some pretty good students from each of those groups. Most of them were kind of in the middle. And I had some students from each of those groups that weren't okay. And then, without getting into the details, I had an opportunity to, I lived by myself the first year. The next year, I wanted to share the rent and all that. I had an opportunity to live with a Black man. He was my age, but he was a student. He'd been in the service. He'd been in and he was from Marigold, Mississippi. Boy, did I learn a lot. And then the next year, I happened to live with share an apartment with another Black man. The learning I got was incredible, and I somewhere, and I also fell into this mixed a social group. We did everything together. I won't say some of them that we did together I'm not necessarily proud of, but we did them. So I think I pretty much lost whatever racism I had been taught. That didn't mean that I can still remember all those ugly stereotypes. I mean, they're probably imprinted on my brain. But I remember making a decision that I wanted to live my life in a way that I didn't let all that stuff I was taught affect how I interacted with people. I'll just give you one concrete example. One of the ugly stereotypes was colored people are dirty. For a while, even though intellectually I wasn't a racist, if somebody I didn't know introduced me to somebody else and we were going to shake hands, there was a part of me that says, don't touch. I just did it anyway. And now there's not much of a problem with it, but that old tape was still there. But and I said, I need to monitor myself. So I think I am not racist, but I certainly got a lot of it. So the question I have is, what then does anti-racist mean? I speak out when I hear, not every time, depending on the situation, but I speak out when I hear people use the stereotypes. I led the diversity program in my organization. First, I was a training and development person, brought that online. So I hope I haven't taken too much time. I'm just trying to struggle with, is the next step to really work maybe more actively about trying to break down the systemic racism? Yeah, so thanks for letting me say all that. And I'm not, I didn't say that to try to say, oh, what a great guy I am. I said it because that's just kind of my evolution. And I think there are a lot of us white folks who are kind of struggling with what that being an anti-racist means at this point. So thank you for listening. You're welcome. I'm open to hearing what anybody has to say.
Let me jump in on that a little bit, because as an educator, you know, someone who teaches journalists now, one of the things that I know that it's changed for me in the way that I talk to students about how to interview people who have gone through trauma, how to interview people who have gone through, you know, violent incidents, anything that has really, really traumatized people, is that it's not just enough to ask them about, tell me about what happened, and I'm listening, but also now it's okay for us as journalists and as people to say, do you have some place that you can go to? Do you have some resource that you can turn to? And that, you know, maybe this is a way that we can start to not just take people's trauma and take people's situation and report on it, but also be in a situation where we can say, you know, is there some place that you can reach out to? Is there a place that, you know, is there a resource that you can access? If not, I have some people, I have some organizations that you might be able to reach out to. And I think that in some ways we need to, people who listen with empathy, we need to start to help to close the circle for many people, right? And not just listen and ask them to teach us and to tell us, but also say, you know, is there anything that you need? What kind of help is there that you need to access? And if those services aren't there, maybe also for me as a journalist, that's part of the story as well. Kat, I don't know, because you offer these services, and I think that they're so important to let people know that, you know, something like HearMe.app is out there, you know, some place like where what the services that Kat offers is available.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question because I think that's something that a lot of people, like you said, are wondering, like how exactly and what exactly does it mean to be anti-racist, right? So I have a pet peeve about um, corporate organizations, putting out an anti-racist policy, because I always ask what else. Like it's more. It has to be more than just a policy statement, right? Because what has happened and where the U.S. and the world has reached has taken place because of more than just policies. It took place because of actions. It took place because people collectively were doing certain actions, and this is what we have reached. So therefore, I think a couple of things. I think one, it's unpacking, and it sounds like you've begun to unpack, and you talked about like, hey, I saw all these things, I was exposed to all these things, but I won't repeat it, and I think that's a great start. I think the second part of that is, now that you've unpacked those things personally with yourself, how do we begin to unpack it when it comes to systems, right? So, who is leading these conversations? Who is actually getting paid to take up the mantle to lead DI experiences? Now, it's wonderful for white folks to be a part of that, but should it be that white folks are getting paid to unpack the experiences of BIPOC folks? Like when you think about it and when you reframe it, you get to realize, wait, something's not making sense here. How come the person that is speaking for me, it's yeah, and then, we talk about that within BIPOC folk communities, is why are people speaking about my experience and I am not being brought to the head to speak about the experience or lead these experience? And I think another part of it, so something that my mentor does with me, so he's from a Mexican origin, but he's very white passing, extremely white passing. um but what he has decided to do, as he is on the end of his career journey and realizing all these things that's happening, he's purposely made a decision to uplift BIPOC folks. So if he gets speaking engagements or things, or things to do, he recommends me, or he recommends other persons that he's mentoring who he can push to the forefront. And one of the other things that he does is that we actually have a webinar coming up where we're going to be talking about trauma informed care within organizations. He is doing the webinar with me and another African American person to say, you know, I have this power, but I'm going to use my power to uplift these young persons who also are Black Caribbean, who also are African American, and we should listen to them if we're going to effect real change. So I think that conversation of using your power to uplift these persons who have not been able to have that power is really an important piece when it comes to being anti-racist.
Thank you.
Um, Thank you. We have 6 or 7 more minutes. Does anyone else? I don't have a question right now. So if Peg or Kat want to jump in if anybody has another question or comment. Feel free. Susan's raising her hand, so yes.
I'm very grateful for this whole idea of conversation. I started a business some time ago that was called Real Conversations That Mattered, and it's there's finally kind of developing into something so simple, it yet brings us. It's so critical to have us in a shared humanity situation. The fact that we can even talk about normalizing humanity is pretty amazing that we're still talking in those terms these days. And the fact that, Jim, I really appreciate you being, you being so vulnerable in talking about your lived experience. I will also say that many of us, perhaps those of us from Yankeetown, who always believed that we were so liberal and, and all of this and that and giving money to things and, this and that. And perhaps most of us have good friends of all varieties. I happen to be in New York, so it's helpful. But, and I should say, and we too are blinded by the veil of the lack, not just education, but not going deeper or making our own attempts to go, wait, there's something we know. We're in a systemically racist society in every aspect, from education to science to politics to the workplace. And I'll just I just had to say it, so I don't want to be too soapboxy here. I will say something that I've done that has profoundly impacted me in a way I never would have imagined. I facilitate for a platform that is about bringing art to accelerate empathy and basically bring people together, and they see a play on a particular issue about racism, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's voting, whether it's men's health, maternal health, these kinds of things. People come together. We may or may not know each other, but we're watching the same piece of art. So we're taken from our heads to our hearts. So we go into breakouts and small conversations. We're already open. We're open without even knowing, because we're coming from our heart and our sharing. And it can be extremely uncomfortable because we're seeing this and we're saying, we can't say, well, we didn't know, we weren't taught. I mean, that's true, but that's very uncomfortable. And when we go there and we get closer and closer, go deeper and deeper and become so connected with each other, that creates a whole different, shall we say, community from which we can start to take action, from which we can go deeper. And things actually, stuff happens as a result of those rooms. So I just wanted to presence the power of the conversation. And when you bring in the heart, through art and imagination, which comes way before business and science and education, it is life-changing. It's truly transformative. So I just wanted to, I feel like I'm
I would say, Susan, that discomfort is good. Like we shouldn't, I think part of that understanding of empathy should lead us to anger. Discomfort, we should not try to ease people's discomfort from these difficult conversations. And one of the things that we know in journalism is that if there's an awkward silence, sometimes that's when people will say, yeah, I did it, right? So, I think these discomfort, I think we need to kind of lean into them a little bit, right? I'm uncomfortable, sometimes when I hear things about the privilege that I've had, and I need to tell people, yeah, I'm uncomfortable, but keep me uncomfortable. That's where change happens, right? Keep me feeling like I need to do more, and that's where maybe the real empathy is coming from.
Indeed. Thank you so much for that. That's very, very poignant and true.
I would just say one last thing. I agree with you so much. I think that change lies in discomfort. Um, but I recognize that I recognize some of the challenges people may have in feeling discomfort. So I'll show you all this, and I don't share this with y'all with anybody much, so y'all are a special bunch right now. So I bought myself this pendant, last year, and it was mainly because I was on this journey of holding multiple things in me and multiple experiences. And I think that a lot of the times when we have difficulty feeling discomfort, it's that reality of we're trying to be either black or white in our thinking and experiences on that, right? There's multiple things. So for instance, if persons confront, let's say, their racist ancestry, right, and confront the fact that, oh, my grandmother did some racist, I'll say for me, my grandmother did some racist things. My grandmother is a Black Caribbean woman, but she had some very racist views against the East Indian population across here. How do I hold both of those things together? How do I hold the fact that this is my grandmother that I care for, that I love, that I respect, etc., and hold the fact that she did some racist things and she did some things that were not okay and said some things that were not okay? But both experiences are valid, and I think that when we recognize that it's not either or, but it's both things together, I think that helps that conflict within us of, it's okay to sit with both of those experiences. You don't have to choose one or the other, and that's just my 2 cents for it.
It is time for us to end. Peg, Fong, Katrina, McIntosh, all of the people on this panel. I'm Richard for being a part of this. Much appreciations. I wish we could just go on and on, but this particular conversation has to end now. So thank you all very much, much appreciated. Peg is putting in her podcast and her email. The podcast is incredible, and I know Kat McIntosh is on LinkedIn as well. I'm on LinkedIn, Adam at HearMe. Okay, gotta go. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Peg, Kat, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Please stay in touch.
Thank you all. Take care. Bye.